Okay, today on the deep dive, we're really going to get into taking writing that's, pretty good, maybe solid B plus lawn, and pushing it up to that C1 level, journal-ready stuff.
Exactly. We've been looking at materials focused on, well, basically a three-draft process designed to do just that.
Right. So our mission today is to pull out the really practical, actionable strategies from these sources, things that can take your writing from just making sense to uh, being genuinely authoritative, something you'd confidently cite yourself, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And it's a common feeling, isn't it? You feel your writing is okay, it gets the point across, but maybe it doesn't sound, I don't know, academic enough or authoritative.
Yeah, exactly that. So we want to unpack some real techniques today, move past vague advice and get into methods you can actually use.
We'll be covering common pitfalls, this three-draft structure, citation strategies, using things like academic phrase
And
banks.
peer review, too. So by the end, you should have a much clearer picture of how to elevate your work.
Let's get started.
Okay, so first segment. Why does some writing, even if the ideas are good, just sound a bit off in an academic context to me? What makes it fall short of C1?
Well, our sources point out that academic writing isn't necessarily like harder, just different. There are specific conventions. And one big culprit they identify is something called zombie nouns.
Zombie nouns. Okay, sounds intriguing. Maybe a bit scary. What are they?
Hey, yeah. They're basically verbs or adjectives that have been turned into nouns. Often they end in things like pollination, ophthalmation, once. So instead of saying, we analyzed the data, you might write, the analysis of the data was undertaken.
Ah, okay, I see that a lot. The implementation of the strategy instead of they implemented the strategy. It sounds more formal, maybe?
It can sound more formal, yeah, but also clunkier,
Hmm.
more abstract, less direct. Our sources really push for reverting back to the stronger verb form.
So change the utilization of methodologies back to they used methods.
Hmm.
Why is that switch so important?
Clarity and conciseness mostly. Strong verbs show who is doing what. It makes your writing more active, more energetic, easier for the reader to follow. These zombie nouns often force you to use weaker verbs like was undertaken or was performed and add extra prepositions. It slows things down.
Right. More words, less punch.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that makes sense. What's another common issue?
Another one is what the sources call hedging overload.
Ah, yes. Using too many qualifiers like it might perhaps be suggested that, or this could possibly indicate. We do it to sound cautious, I guess.
Exactly. And a certain amount of hedging is necessary in academic writing, especially with tentative findings. But overdoing it just makes you sound unsure, lacking confidence in your own claims.
So instead of it could perhaps be suggested, you'd go with something stronger.
Yeah, something like evidence suggests or the findings indicate. If your research supports the claim, state it more directly. It sounds more authoritative.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance between appropriate caution and just sounding weak. Assertiveness, but backed by evidence.
Precisely. You don't want to overstate your case, obviously, but you also don't want to dilute your arguments with unnecessary fluff.
Got it. And there was a third one mentioned early on, something about citations.
Yes, citation ticks.
Yeah.
This is about how you introduce citations. Things like, many scholars say, or research has shown.
What's the problem with that? Seems common enough.
It's too vague. It lacks specificity. Which scholars? Whose research? Good academic practice requires you to be precise.
Ah, so instead of many scholars say, you should actually name them. Like Smith, 2020, argues that,
Yeah.
or Jones and Lee, 2021, found.
Exactly. It shows you've actually read the specific work you're citing, it gives credit properly, and it allows your reader to trace the intellectual conversation. It adds credibility.
Makes sense. Precision is key. So our sources also mention a tool, Hemingway app, as a sort of first check.
Yeah, it's a simple tool you can paste text into. It flags things like complex sentences, passive voice, adverbs. It gives a readability score. The sources suggest that if your text is scoring, say, grade 12 or higher, it might actually be too complex and could benefit from simplification for clarity, even for C1. It's not a perfect measure for academic style, but it can highlight potential density issues.
Interesting. So a lower grade might actually be better in some ways. Worth checking out. Okay, so we've got zombie nouns, hedging, citation ticks. How do we fix all this systematically? Our sources talk about a three-draft method.
Yes, this is a really practical structure. It breaks the writing process down. First is draft one, which they sometimes call the vomit draft.
Yeah, charming name,
Yep.
but descriptive.
Very. The idea is just get everything down. All your ideas, notes, thoughts, connections. Don't edit. Don't worry about perfect sentences or even citations at this point. Just pour it all out. Freedom to be messy.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Less pressure initially.
Yeah.
So once you have that mess, what's a draft 2, the scholarly draft?
That's right. Draft 2 is where you build the academic scaffolding. The main focus here is citations. You go through your messy first draft and back up every claim, every piece of information that isn't common knowledge with a specific source. Rigorous sourcing.
So every assertion needs evidence pinned to it, okay? That sounds like the heavy lifting part, maybe?
It can be, yeah. It's where you really integrate your research into your argument. You're transforming your initial ideas into a properly supported academic text.
And then draft 3, the scalpel draft.
Yeah.
Sounds painful.
Huh. It requires being critical, yes. The focus here is ruthless conciseness and clarity. You take draft 2, which might be a bit bloated after adding all the citations and formal phrasing, and you cut. The goal suggested is often around a 20% word count reduction.
20%? Wow. That's a lot. Why be so aggressive?
Because academic writing thrives on precision. Cutting unnecessary words, tightening sentences, removing jargon, it makes your argument sharper, more focused, and ultimately more persuasive. Every word needs to earn its place.
Okay, so draft 1, ideas dump. Draft 2, scholarly support citations. Draft 3, cut, clarify, refine. That feels like a really manageable process.
It really is. It separates the different tasks of writing, which can make the whole thing feel less overwhelming.
Our sources hinted at maybe applying this to a real example later, like taking a vague thesis statement, something like globalization is kind of bad, and showing how C1 techniques refine it. That would be fascinating.
Absolutely. Seeing it in action would really drive the points home. But sticking with the process for now, let's talk more about those citations in draft 2 and 3. It's not just adding them, is it?
Right. The sources emphasize using them dynamically, making them part of the argument, not just proof tacked on at the end. How do we do that?
Well, think about how you're using the source. Are you agreeing with it, challenging it, building on it? Your phrasing should reflect that. Our sources give some great sentence starters for this.
Okay, like what? How would you show agreement?
You could say something like, Smith's 2020 findings corroborate, or, as Davis 2019 correctly points out, it shows you're aligning yourself with that research.
Okay, that's much stronger than just ticking Smith 2020 at the end. What about disagreement? How do you engage critically?
You might use phrasing like, while Johnson 2018 argues X, contemporary data undermines this view. See Peters 2022. Or a limitation of Lee's 2017 model is, it creates that sense of scholarly debate.
Right, positioning your argument within the conversation and building upon existing work.
Something like building on Chen's 2021 framework, I propose, or Garcia's 2020 research provides a foundation for, however. It acknowledges the prior work while signaling your own contribution.
These are really useful. It makes the citations feel much more integrated, more active in the writing.
Exactly. It's about weaving them into the fabric of your argument. Our sources also mentioned a shapefile of real citation errors from undergrad papers, with permission, of course, just to show what not to do. We won't detail them, but it highlights that getting this right matters.
Definitely. Okay, moving on. Another tool mentioned was the academic phrase bank hack. What's this about?
This is about strategically using common, accepted phrases that signal specific academic moves. It's not about plagiarism, but about using the conventional language of academic discourse effectively.
So, like knowing the standard ways to introduce a critique or summarize or concede a point.
Precisely. Think of it as a toolkit of useful sentence stems. For instance, if you want to critique something, instead of just saying this is wrong, you might use a phrase bank opener like.
The source suggested something like, the narrative collapses under 3 objections, or a key weakness in this argument.
Exactly. It signals your intent clearly and uses established academic phrasing. What about conceding a limitation?
Maybe. Admittedly, the sample size constraints, or, while this is a valid point, it overlooks, acknowledging limits professionally.
Right. And for summarizing.
Things like, taken together, these findings imply. Or, in summary, the key arguments are clear signals for synthesis.
The sources even posed a little challenge. Try rewriting something vague, like, I think, maybe, using one of these more formal phrase bank openers. It's a good exercise to practice elevating your language.
Yeah, forcing yourself to use those structures. It's about sounding like you belong in the academic conversation, using its conventions fluently.
That's a great way to put it. And that leads nicely into the final piece our sources stress, peer review, getting feedback.
Yes, the vital, sometimes scary step of letting someone else read your work. Why is this so crucial for C1?
Because we often become blind to our own writing's flaws. Awkward phrasing, unclear arguments, missing citations. A fresh pair of eyes can spot these much more easily. But the sources recommend a structured approach to peer review, not just asking, is it good?
Okay, what does this structured review involve?
It's a simple three-part exercise you can do when swapping papers with a friend or colleague. First, the reviewer finds and praises one sentence they think is brilliant, genuinely well written.
Okay, start positive. Find something that works well. What's next?
Second, they slaughter their term. One sentence that is confusing, awkward, or unclear. Pinpoint something specific that needs fixing.
Slaughter. Okay, memorable. So, targeted criticism on clarity. And the third part.
Third, they demand one missing citation. They look for a specific claim or piece of information that feels like it needs a source but doesn't have one.
Praise, slaughter, demand citation. It's very focused. One brilliant sentence, one confusing sentence, one missing source.
Exactly. It gives concrete, actionable feedback rather than vague impressions. And the pro tip is, obviously, do this before you submit the work for grading or publication.
Yeah. Catch the problems early. That makes a huge amount of sense. It's like a mini revision roadmap provided by someone. Right. And using that structured three-draft method, vomit draft for ideas, scholarly draft for citations, scalpel draft for conciseness.
Then, using citations dynamically agreeing, disagreeing, building upon making them part of your argument.
Leveraging academic phrase banks strategically to use conventional academic language effectively.
And finally, embracing structured peer review. Praise, slaughter, demand citation to get targeted feedback before submission.
So your mission, should you choose to accept it? A couple of things to try. First, maybe find an old essay and just try deleting every fifth word, see if it still makes sense. It's a rough test for wordiness.
Yeah, a bit brutal but revealing. And second, take one paragraph you're working on now. Actively apply these ideas. Hunt down zombie nouns, strengthen hedges, integrate a citation more actively, maybe use a phrase bank opener, just work on one paragraph.
Little exercises to start building the habits. And a final thought to leave you with. Mastering this kind of C1 writing isn't just about grades or publications. Think about it when you can express complex ideas with clarity, precision, authority. What other areas of your life could that impact? What possibilities open up?
That's a good question. And looking ahead, our next deep dive will get into C1 vocabulary using sophisticated words, well, without sounding forced. And we'll start thinking about the next step too, moving towards C2 level writing.
Lots to look forward to. This has been really insightful. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.